I'm the director of the OpenEMR project. We have a free open source electronic health record that we've been developing. We're going to do an open source presentation today with multiple contributors. So my project manager, Tony McCormick, is going to help give the presentation. Well, I was asked to talk today about the growth and development of the OpenEMR project. So our agenda is going to talk about, well, me, who am I, why am I here, what's the history of the project, what does our software structure look like, what kind of growth we've been seeing, the growing internationalization of our project, how many developers we're currently working with, and what kind of support we get in our project, and how do you make a project like this work. Tony's going to talk about meaningful use, modular certification, and some of our future plans for the project. And last of all, what is your return on investment by using open source software? Well, first of all, I'm a doctor. I'm in private practice. I practice about 60 hours a week and a very active user of open source software in my practice. We use OpenOffice. We use a Hylafax server to catch incoming faxes. We take those faxes, convert them to PDFs, and load them immediately into our database. I use as many open source tools that I can. All of our workstations are usually running some kind of open source Linux variant. Currently we're on CentOS for most of the workstations. We do have some billing systems that are still running in Windows, so we have a few Windows workstations, but there's a high degree of open source software in our office. I got involved in the OpenEMR project back in 2003, primarily because I was looking at these electronic vendors. The one at the time that I looked at, they wanted $125,000 just for me as one doctor, and they wanted another $6,000 a month ongoing forever to pay for their software. I choked quietly, went back and decided, well, hey, I'm going to write my own. And I went after it busily, and I really figured out that it was going to take me a long time to really come up with an electronic health record. So I said, well, I never actually looked for one on the internet, so I started doing searches, and I found 12 open source projects, of which 6 were defunct and no longer in business. 6 were working. I downloaded all 6 of them. I got them working, got them all installed, up and running, and then I just gave a vote to my staff, which one did you like the best? And we had 12 votes that all voted for OpenEMR, and 1 vote against. So the comment that everybody made was that it was easy to use, easy to learn, easy for them to start doing their job almost immediately with minimal instruction. And the one thing that you hear more and more every time somebody looks at OpenEMR and starts using it is how easy it is to use. This is really in contradiction to many of the other proprietary software vendors where their products are very difficult to learn how to use, they're difficult to implement, and there's a high failure rate if they're not implemented correctly. So I started a nonprofit organization called Open Source Medical Software, primarily to support this project and really any open source medical software project that wanted to get involved and use our resources. Later, we were finally able to get a 501c tax-exempt status, and I became the executive director of the OEMR project. Okay, so what does OpenEMR mean? This is an acronym back when the day when an EMR was that, just an EMR, and was originally started writing this in 1998. Cinetech, a company in Boston, started the original coding as an adjunct to their billing service. They managed their product for about 3 years, turned over project leadership to a company in San Diego called Pinform that also operated for about 3 years. They got tired of losing money, put the code on SourceForge, and turned over management of the project to me and 3 other developers. OpenEMR is a web-based client-server architecture, so it's easy to deploy in the cloud or on the internet or whatever you'd like to call that. As long as you're able to run the LAMP stack, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, OpenEMR will run on that platform. So I've seen people running, I know it runs on Windows, Linux, OS 10, FreeBSD, OpenBSD. We've had at least one group, it got it working on Solaris. All you have to be able to do is run the LAMP stack and it just works. It's primarily written in PHP with a MySQL backend, so thanks to Oracle. And we have a lot of JavaScript, some Java query, or jQuery, and Ajax. And as I said, Cinetech was the original, originally wrote the software. So we have actually this hodgepodge of code that begins with PHP 3, then it has some PHP 4, and now we're on PHP 5. Got about 1 million lines of code, and we're kind of in desperate need of a complete rewrite and restructuring, refactoring of the software to bring it up to the more modern standards. Hopefully, I don't know if PHP 6 will be out by the time we do that.
It doesn't matter as long as we refactor the model view controller in 9.
Yeah.
And less manual. Less code mangling, more MVC.
Okay. So our open source medical software came into existence March 15th, 2005, and that's when we assumed the project leadership. Since then, we've been growing pretty rapidly. I took over the web project and became the site engine optimizer about October of 2005. We're currently having about 925 downloads a week from SourceForge, and that works out to be just under 4,000 downloads a month. In the lifetime of the project, we've had 120,000 downloads. I like to talk about this as fair market value is probably $35,000 a copy. So we've given away $4.2 billion worth of software in the last 7 years. It's interesting, started as a Linux project, Linux fanatics running this project, and still are. As soon as we ported this over to a Windows version, Windows took over like crazy and is now the predominant operating system that is running our OpenEMR. It's kind of interesting. We have a lot of Windows, Linux. The unknown users are probably just downloading tarballs and not identifying their operating system. And we even had one guy who successfully got his a full version of OpenEMR running on his Android. That's kind of a hat trick. Okay, we have a lot of internationalization. Again, we have downloads from 174 different countries right now. The majority is still the United States, about 35%, about 15% from India. The number 3 spot in Linux is Indonesia. If you throw in Windows, the number 3 spot ends up being Ethiopia. But the purple areas makes up 165 countries, I think. So it's really interesting how we're growing internationally. International Planned Parenthood Federation adopted OpenEMR about 5 years ago. They started providing a lot of monetary support and paying for a lot of the development. IPPF has currently got installations in India, Nepal, Indonesia, Central Africa, Armenia, and Barbados. They operate in 150 different countries, and they're planning on rolling this out through the entire organization.
Like 800 clinics or something.
They have something like 800 clinics worldwide. So they're really good at writing excellent documentation, and some of our best documentation is actually coming from IPPF. They also integrated the Pentaho Business Analysis suite to give some nice reporting. And we'd like to, we haven't done it yet, but we'd like to bring that into the full version of OpenEMR for the US as well. They tend to operate in very minimal environments, and they need minimalist types of installations. So they're very concerned about what is the smallest architecture that we can get the OpenEMR working on, and what are the minimum requirements necessary to be able to operate the program correctly. We have a big translation project going on. Currently, we're fully translated in Dutch, Spanish, Portuguese, Greek, Turkish, French, and currently about 37% simplified Chinese. I threw the Indian flag in here too because they're such big supporters of the OpenEMR project. And they are working on Indian English. as one of the translations. Okay. Currently, or in 2005, when we first took over the project, there was me and 3 developers. And what we've been doing is doubling about every 2 years. So maybe by 2006, 6 full-time guys, 2009, maybe 12 developers. Currently, we have about 23 full-time developers in the project. And a prototype of a developer in our project is Richard Stallings, founder of the Free Software Foundation and the original creator of the GPL license. Sorry? Is it Stallman? I'm sorry. Got the wrong, sorry.
Sorry, not trying to be here.
It's been a while since I looked it up, sorry. I haven't met him personally. Okay. Major supporters, MI2 is an IT company that has between 3 and 4 full-time developers working for the project. vSolve is a California-based company that uses mostly Indian developers. They have about 5 developers working with the project right now. ZH Healthcare is Virginia-based, and they have, I think, about 3 developers who are actually Indian-based also. IPPF mostly invests money in some of the developers that work here in the United States. There's Sunset Systems with Rod Rourke, who's been one of our original guys from back in 2005. And then Dr. Brady Miller is an oncology fellow who is actually our code reviewer and is a very prolific, active guy. It's amazing how much he can get done, and we wonder what if he ever sleeps. Anyway, I wanted to turn over the rest of the talk here to Tony to talk about meaningful use and the open source model.